What's up guys, it is Dan Cam, and I am back with another video. Thank you for tuning in. We've got an interesting one here today because I was talking to GIGABYTE and they said they had their new X870E Aero X3D Wood motherboard. And this is a pretty feature-packed motherboard. It is an X870E chipset. We've got a 16+2+2 VRM design. We've got two PCIe 5.0 M.2 slots and two PCIe 4.0 M.2 slots, as well as a bunch of other features. And it also has 8 PWM headers, which is absolutely insane. So you can run a ton of fans off of this motherboard. And if we take a look at the back, we've got a pretty feature-packed I/O back here with dual 5 gigabit LAN. We've got 2 USB 4, and we've got a host of other USB-A ports. But the biggest thing with this motherboard is it actually has this wood paneling on it, which I think looks really cool. And then we have these pull tabs that actually match with that wood grain over here. But it's a really cool looking motherboard, and I feel like wood has become very popular, especially with cases. So I think GIGABYTE was thinking, let's put it on a motherboard. So we're gonna do a build here today and try to include as many wood grain style products as we can. And then I also reached out to Corsair, and they said that they have this wood panel RAM. And this is Corsair Vengeance, and then we've got this cool wood pattern on both of them. And just in case you're wondering, I did 3D print this little RAM stand. So big shout out to Corsair for supplying the RAM, and then GIGABYTE for supplying the motherboard and also the GPU, which I'll show off later. But I was on Amazon trying to find a case that matched really well, and then I ended up finding the Lianli LanCool 217, and I did a build in the black version quite a while ago, and a lot of you absolutely love that build. But I felt like this case was the closest as far as matching the style wood that's on it. So we've got a really cool looking build here. And then I did just buy this off Amazon, but I have worked with Lianli quite a bit in the past, but this one I ended up just buying. So we've got a really cool build, guys. So I think we should just go ahead and get into the build process, and then I'll talk you through it, all of my thoughts on the process, and we're gonna try to make this look as clean as possible. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so I'm at a bit of a stopping point. We do have the motherboard installed, and we do have some I/O connections connected, like the USB-C. We've got USB-A down here, and then we also have our front panel connector. And you probably didn't notice that I didn't plug in HD audio. I actually just have that sitting in the drive bay down here to keep this cable out of the way. For myself personally, I never use the 3.5mm audio jack on any build, and I'm actually just building this for content, so I figured why even plug in the HD audio? It's just another cable that kind of dangles and gets in the way. So we've got some of that done. And then you notice this case does come with a lot of fans, but the 170s, I believe, in the front, I'm not going to use them. I want all matching fans all around. So you could remove those, and then you can install these two brackets so you can actually install 120 millimeter fans. Then if you move the brackets over one notch, you can see that threaded hole right there. If you use that one, you can use 140 millimeter fans. So there's a lot of options for this case. So I've got the 120s right here, and we're gonna have 3 in the front. And then what else? The motherboard does look good in there. The unfortunate part about white components in general is a lot of them are not matching. Cases don't match motherboards and fans don't match. So overall, I think it looks really good. And once it's all fully populated, it'll look great. But this is like a whitish gray. Then the case is just kind of a pure white, but I still think it's going to look good. I do like the wood accents on the motherboard, and then also the RAM right there. I think that looks really cool. And then as far as cable management, I removed all of the fans, so all of those cables are gone. And then I did my front IO cable management. You can see everything's kind of tucked over here. And then I have the USB-A tucked into this side slot right here, so it's pretty out of the way. Then all of our cables are kind of right here. We've got USB-C, USB-A, and then our front panel connectors right there. But the nice thing about this cable right here is our 24 pin for the motherboard is going to come up and hide that entire bunch. So we shouldn't be able to see it. And there is an included fan controller that I don't think I'm going to use just quite yet, because once all the cables are going to be connected, it's going to be kind of a mess up here. So I'm not fully sure how I'm going to do the fans yet, but that's the kind of thing that I just kind of decide once I get there. And it would minimize having to cable manage all of these cables, because we do have a PWM cable, SATA, and then also 5-volt ARGB, so we can power all the fans and all that good stuff. But we're off to a good start, so I say we move to the next item within the build. So let's do it. All right, guys, so the build is all done, and this is a really interesting one. I do think it looks really cool, but we've got a very interesting mashup of colors here, because we've got the case, which is a very pure white with the wood accents. And then we've got the motherboard and the GPU, which are pretty much like an off-white slash gray slash silver with those wood accents. And the RAM's really hard to see, but that obviously has the wood accents. And then the fans are kind of an off-white, and then they have silver in the center. So it is a matching build, but at the same time, it's kind of an interesting blend of colors here. And I've got the RGB set to a warm white, which I figured would look really good with all of the wood accents. And overall, I think it's a cool build. And the more I look at it, the more it's growing on me. And just how much time I put into this one It came out really clean. Once we take off the panels, you'll see how good the cable management actually turned out, actually much better than I thought. But this is a really interesting one. So let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on your first impressions of this. And then we'll take off the case, we'll take off the panels and look at the inside. Then you can let me know what you think once we get into that side. So on that note, let's just go ahead and get into it. So one of the first things you're probably gonna notice about this build is the AIO screen. It is absolutely gigantic and is very reminiscent of a cell phone from like the 2012s. Like it looks like an iPhone 7 Plus or something like that. But it looks really cool and it could be mounted horizontally or vertically. And this is the Fantex, let me get the name right. It is the Glacier One 360 M25 LCD. So quite the mouthful. I had to look over at the box to remember what the name is, but really cool new screen from them. This is actually a brand new product from them. And you can customize it however you want. The screen actually looks really good. This is kind of just the default template it comes with. I'm really into that like Japanese garden aesthetic, if you couldn't tell from my main wallpaper and also my desk mat. And this is Highstar Midori on Steam Wallpaper Engine, just in case anyone is curious, because I do get comments on it all the time. And the desk mat is the Highstar Midori. So the company is Highstar and the name of the wallpaper and the desk mat is Midori. So the screen looks really cool. And one thing about this AIO is the tubes actually come out the top. And you can kind of see our routing right here. So it actually ended up routing really nicely, because we're going to look at the PC like this, and you can see those tubes do not dangle in front of the screen, and they're pretty much viewable at most angles except when you start looking like this, but that's kind of an unusual angle. So I ended up using these clips right here to kind of shape these tubes, and you can see it's a really clean line, and then they go over here. So that looks really clean and it's not blocking the screen at all. And then as far as the motherboard looks great. Unfortunately, I'm using 30mm thick fans, so that wood accent is kind of blocked. And then so is the bottom one by the GPU. But the motherboard looks great. It is an X870E chipset motherboard, so it is their high-end, chipset. Looks great though. I haven't used it too in-depth yet. I mean, I had to go through the BIOS, but great looking motherboard with some great features as well. So that looks cool. And you can see we have this RGB on it right there, which on camera is really bright, but it actually says Aero right there. So I've actually just got all of the RGB set to like a warm white, which I do think looks really cool. And it's kind of lighting up the backside of the screen. So I honestly think that looks kind of cool with the RGB on the RAM and the RGB on the motherboard. It's kind of making the screen pop a little bit more. So that is a really cool look. And then let's see, we've got the GPU. This is a GIGABYTE AERO 5080, and this is actually an SFF model. So this is a smaller form factor 5080, but obviously performs just like a 5080. It can pretty much crush any game that's out there right now. So that actually looks really cool. And then for storage, we've got a Corsair MP700 Elite, and I believe it's Gen 5, but it may be Gen 4. I'm gonna have to correct that later on when I'm editing. And then the fans are the T-Comas FC700 Pros. And I've actually had these for quite a while, but I haven't used them. But they're a very interesting look. Like I said, they are 30mm thick. They can move a lot of air. The fan curves are a little aggressive right now, so if you do hear some fan noise occasionally, that's just because the fan curves are not properly set, but these things can move a ton of air. And the RGB pattern on them is really interesting, because if we take a look at the side, we've got kind of like this silver plating, which I think looks really good with like the GPU and the motherboard. And then the RGB, we've got some on the side, and then it kind of continues to the face of the fan. And it's just a really interesting look. And I was kind of unsure of it at first, but I think it honestly looks really cool. And they perform extremely well. Then if we take a look at the front here, you're probably wondering why I have the fans mounted behind the bracket instead of in front. Well, on this case, when they're mounted in the front, there's just a ton of dead zone right here. Like this entire zone is just unoccupied and kind of leaves a big blank space. So I decided to put them on the back side, so this side is filled up a little bit more, but they're more sunken in on the front, which I don't think looks bad. And then I have these little things right here that the case comes with. to kind of eliminate some of that dead area right there. But the fans look good. They hook up really easily. Basically, each fan group has a 5-volt ARGB plug and also a PWM plug. So I've got those all routed very, very cleanly to fan headers. You can see this one's coming out right here, and then it's going through right there. There's just like a little slot where I have the cables through, and they're going towards the motherboard. And then these ones come out right here, and those are going around the fans towards the motherboard. And then the front fans, the connection's actually at the top, and the cable's coming behind the fans, then also going to the bottom of the motherboard. And then the top ones, the cable's right here, and those are routed behind the radiator and plugged into the top of the motherboard right there. So routing all the cables was fairly easy. Just did my usual Dankamcontact cable hiding method. But overall, guys, this build does look really cool. And we can actually see the PSU from this side. We've got an Asus Tough Gaming 1000-watt PSU. And this does come with some really nice cables. They're a little bit hard to manage because they're so flexible and there's no cable combs, but they are really easy to shape and kind of maneuver however you need to. Then if we take a look down here, you can see our cable management all the way through is super clean. So let's go ahead and take a look at the back. So here is the cable management for the back, and by golly, this came out much better than I expected. We've got all of our front panel IO cables going right here, and then here's our 24 pin, here's our CPU cables, and then our GPU cables are kind of looped underneath right there. But those are all the cables down here. Like if I move this, you can see there are no other cables down here. I ended up removing the drives just so I can see, the drive cages, just so I can see all of these cables better. But the cable management on this is absolutely insane. Maybe some of my best work. And then you can see our CPU cables come up here, and then I've just got them tied right here. And then those are going towards the top of the motherboard. But really clean lines, really clean bottom little basement right here for all the cables. The length of all of them just ended up working out so unbelievably well. And sometimes I plan it, sometimes I don't. And then this one, I finished the build, and I probably spent about another hour just kind of cleaning things up and making the cable management even better. But the coloring of the PSU cables is also quite a bit different too. They're like an off-white, and then the case is kind of like a whitish. It almost kind of looks purple, especially looking at my camera right now. Definitely kind of has a purple tint to it. So very interesting shades of white for this build, which I'm not mad at, but that's kind of how it is with white components on the market anyways. Some are more pure white, some are more off-white, some come off looking purple. So that's just kind of how it is. But guys, the cable management is so clean. Absolutely love how it came out. Let's see, is there anything else I'm forgetting to talk about here? I just want to thank GIGABYTE for sending out the motherboard and the GPU. I want to thank Corsair for sending out the RAM. I want to thank Fantex for sending out the AIO. And yeah, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments. Like the video, share it with your friends. Let me know your thoughts on this. Is there anything that you would have done differently with this build? Do you like the color contrast of this? Just let me know your thoughts down below. But I don't really think there's anything that I missed. If there is, I'll throw it down in the pinned comment below. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see y'all in the next video, and I hope you guys have a great day. See ya.